Good morning. It's so good to see all of you with us today. It's a beautiful day. It's a great day of worship. It's so wonderful to be gathered here together with you, worshiping the Lord here in spirit and in truth together. And I hope that the lesson today will bring some things out of the text that will be interesting to you, that will challenge you and uplift you as well. I know it's kind of a strange text to use for a day like today, but I like to preach strange sermons sometimes. And so I hope you'll enjoy this one today. As I think about the situation in the Scripture, in 1 Kings chapter 3, I want to think about and to chronicle in Scripture a series of detours or choices that have robbed mankind of the blessings of the quality of life that God has designed for us. Many of these detours that we see and these choices away from God have inadvertently or indirectly affected the home in a very negative way. For instance, the knowledge of good, the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil over the tree of life. They, Adam and Eve, both lost right to the tree of life. And as a consequence, sin entered into the world and death by sin. They were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. There was a new distance between God and them, a distance that they had never known before. And that God rejected that offering. He was angry. Cain was angry. And he took it out on Abel, his brother, by killing him. The Bible tells us that after a conversation with God, a little heart-to-heart, Cain kind of dug his heels and went out from the presence of the Lord. And all of his line, his seed line, perished in the great flood. In Genesis chapter 6, man by and large had distanced themselves from God and became a nation of the thoughts and intents. The thoughts and intents of the heart were only evil continually. And that God looked upon the earth in verse number 12, and behold, it was corrupt. All flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And in chapter 6, verse number 13, the earth was filled with violence through them. And he said, behold, I will destroy the earth. So God sent a flood. After the flood, Noah planted a vineyard. Nothing wrong with grapes. Nothing wrong with grape juice. But if you don't preserve it correctly, it ferments. Drunk. And he was naked in his tent. And the picture that is painted for us over in Genesis chapter 9 is that Ham saw the nakedness of his father. And what he did with it is he told his brothers about it. Only the Hebrew indicates that he did this in somewhat of what he saw his father's tent. Something like that should not give us delight to report. That's nothing to sport about or to make fun of. We should never be entertained by that which God calls sin or an abomination. He determined to mock his father and was undermining his authority as a man of God. The Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 20 and verse number 1 that wine is a mocker, and whoever is deceived thereby is not wise. Proverbs chapter 23, verses 29 through 33 describes the drunk in his foolishness. And as a result of Ham's mocking his father, chapter 9, verse number 25, the Bible says, cursed be Canaan. Who's Canaan? Well, Canaan was a son of Ham, the man for whom the land of Canaan to prophetically reveal the destiny of his son Canaan. In Genesis, the 10th chapter, verses 15 through Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgashite, and the Hivite, and the Archite. All the ites that you'd see in the land of Canaan came from Ham. Genesis chapter 11 is the Tower of Babel in the land of Shinar. And because of the pride, because of their intent to build a tower who would reach heaven, because they were going to make a name for themselves, God says, if we don't put a stop to this, there's no telling what they'll accomplish. And so he confused the languages. Earth was of one language in speech. I wish I would know what the language was before the languages were confused. But the fact that we have to have translators today goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. There was confusion. Dwelled in the cities of the plain. The Bible tells us that he set his tent up towards the land of Sodom, but the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinners before the Lord. And in 2 Peter chapter 2, beginning in verse number 6, it says, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. And if he refused, or rather rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man, that tells you a little. Something of the culture of Sodom and Gomorrah. But he lost his family. His wife looked back. Genesis 19 and verse number 26. She turned to salt. And from that particular incident, Jesus made a lesson in Luke 17, verse number 32, that once you put your hand to the plow and look back in the church building down at San Antonio, the Shenandoah congregation, a clock. And under that clock it said, remember life. Genesis 25 and verse number 34, there's Jacob and Esau. Esau, you'll remember, despised his birthright and sold it for a bowl of stew. It was a choice that was made than what they were before. Hebrews chapter 12 and verse number 17 says, for you know that afterward Esau have inherited the blessing, but he was rejected, for he found no place of repentance, though we sought it carefully and with tears. Yet to go to the promised land. Promised land. 10 of the 12 spies were faithless. 40 years they wandered in the wilderness because of faithless spies, because 2 were outvoted by the 10. Over in the book of Joshua, there's a man named Achan that stole of the accursed thing some of the spoils of war from the city of Jericho, was compromised in battle. And as a result, there was an investigation that was launched. And of course, they found out about Achan, and he and all his family died. During the period of the Judges, there was a cycle of faithful living followed by sin, followed by a period of consequence. They would be oppressed by their wicked and enemy nations. The sabbatical year. Sabbatical year, every 7 years. Deuteronomy 15. Notice this at chapter 15, verses 1b. He says, at the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release. And this is the manner of the release. Every creditor shall release what he has lent to his neighbor. And he shall not exact it of his neighbor, his brother, because the Lord's release has been proclaimed. Of a foreigner you may exact it, but whatever of yours is with your brother, your hand shall reform. Listen. But there will be no poor among you. Jesus had said, the poor you always have with you. But at the time of the writing in Deuteronomy 15, if the Israelite nation would have lived in covenant with God, there would have been no poor among them. For the Lord would have blessed them in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess, if only you will strictly obey the voice of the Lord that I command you this day, and be careful to do all this commandment. But you know the story. You know how it winds up. There were poor people in Israel. And part of that is they rejected God's ways. They rejected God's government and governance in 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse number 7. They looked at all the nations around them, and for some reason they thought it would be such a great idea to have a centralized government like all the nations around them. And so Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. And he said, this is what God says to Samuel to tell the people. If you want a monarchy, here's what you can expect. He says, these will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and some to reap his harvest, and some to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. And he will take the best of your fields, that's eminent domain, and vineyards and olive orchards, and give them to his servants. And he will take the tenth of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers. That's taxation. He will take your male servants and your female servants and the best of your young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will then take the tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves. And that day you'll cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord will not answer you in that day. And then he gives a little admonition to future kings in Deuteronomy 17, beginning in verse number 14. He says, when you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you possess it and you dwell in it, and you say, I will set over me a king, like all the other nations that are around me. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you, who is not your brother. Only he must not require many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest he turn his heart away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. And when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself in a book a copy of this law, approved by the Levitical priest. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Lord his God, by keeping all the words of the law and all these statutes and doing them, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment, neither to the right hand or to the left, so that he may not continue long, or that he may continue long in his kingdom, and he and his children in Israel. Now you know that those were the ideal. That was the ideal, that if they were going to go this direction, that if they went that direction, that they needed to have these things in place. But if you'd have the government of the Lord and things were going to be organized the way God had organized, there wouldn't be poor people in the nation of Israel. And you stop and think about it. There are two reasons for prostitution in any country. There's the immorality of it. Maybe some people want to do that. But then there's some people that feel forced to do that. It is my understanding from some of my friends who have personally been in Houston, when they worked the inner city, when they were down there downtown passing out tracts, you could only get within so many feet of the Planned Parenthood building. But they would go down there and they would do evangelism, and a lot of the women that were going inside Planned Parenthood were not free agents. A lot of times their pimps would prohibit them from taking any tracts or literature by members of the church. Why were they doing that? They were doing that because they had to make a living. Or they felt like they needed to make a living. That there's some reason why they felt they needed to do this in order to make ends meet, to put food on the table. In Genesis chapter 38, verse number 15 and 14, you have the story of Judah and Tamar. And you got Rahab in Joshua 2. And you got Samson visiting a harlot, 16 and verse number 1. 16 and verse number 1. Over in Genesis 34, verse number 31, you have the story of Dinah, and who violated Dinah, and of course died at the end of the story because of that. Because Leviticus 19 in verse number 29 warned against prostituting their daughters. They were not to consider treating a girl like a prostitute. That was a grave. Leviticus 21 and verse number 9, a priest's daughter was not allowed to become a prostitute. Prostitutes could be encountered in the streets, the squares, the street corners, calling out to pass on the harp, Isaiah 23 and verse number 16. They bathed in public pools, warned, Proverbs chapter 6, verses 24 and 25. They're numbered with a lot of other immoral women who were considered to be a seductress. And, by the way, when Israel would dabble in idolatry, that was considered not only spiritual adultery, but spiritual prostitution. My friends, it was kind of a condemned thing. Not just kind of, it was in fact a condemned thing. Deuteronomy chapter 23, were temple prostitutes that were associated with the false religions of the day. And God says, you're not going to do that. And yet, in 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse number 22, Eli's sons were meeting together to do lewd things, really, because the subject is so big. But I wanted to try to paint a picture that why do you have a scenario of two prostitutes questioning the ownership or the parenthood of the child in 1 Kings chapter 3 under the reign of King Solomon? I mean, this is King David's son. King Solomon was one of the wisest, if not the wisest person on earth ever. And he was the best king, so to speak, for so long. And the nation of Israel had become so rich under his reign. There were so many good things. And it's from this scenario, it's from this text that we draw this beautiful lesson. That God is able to to take out of what you might consider a most unlikely source, a most unlikely story, that this text that is designed to show the wisdom of Solomon is also a text that shows wonderful principles of motherhood. I think about the fact that Titus had encouraged older women to teach the younger women to love their husbands. Actually, they were working at home, Titus chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. There's a t-shirt that I saw the other day that says, "Motherhood is a full-time job." And those women that work outside the home, they have 2 full-time jobs. I try to encourage the husband, but even Proverbs 31 woman did a lot of work. What are some good principles as we think about this story from 1 Kings chapter 3 this morning that we can learn about? And I think when you look at these mothers, and you take your Bible and go back to 1 Kings chapter 3, and you'll notice that all the lessons today come from 2 verses in this text, and that's verse number 26 and 27. Verse number 26, yearned with compassion. Yearned with compassion for her son. And she said, "Oh, my Lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him." 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28 gives a powerful picture of motherhood through the emotions of these 2 women standing before Solomon. I don't think that this was like the people's court and they just went to Solomon one day. I think that this court, they'd gone to court over this deal and it worked its way up, and somebody said, "Look, we don't know how to decide this thing. Solomon's going to have to deal with this one." And so it made its way all the way up to the top. Is that a true mother always protects life. The real mother in this text would rather lose custody of her child than to see him harmed. Verse number 26, give her the living child and by no means kill it. This reveals that authentic motherhood is deeply protective and self-sacrificing. I have seen Christian women who are mothers come to protect their children. I've seen Mama Bear come out. I remember one time our family with a little bitty area of water that was flowing through, but there was an area where there was kind of a whirlpool of water. And I think that if Caden had gone with it instead of fighting against it, I think if he'd just gone with the flow, it would have spit him out down there somewhere. But before I even realized what was going on with Caden, Lena was off from in that woman. I thought, she's going to lose her footing and she's going to get washed down the river too. Apparently there was some kind of resolve in that woman to save her child. I didn't even realize what was going on. I couldn't have gotten to him faster than she could have. But I think about that determination to protect life. Number 2, motherhood is marked by compassion. Look at verse number 26. heard for her son. Compassion identified the true mother. We learn that motherhood involves deep emotional attachment. Genuine maternal love responds with mercy and tenderness. Compassion is stronger than rivalry or pride, wanting her child to die. Just give the other woman the child. If this is the way it's going to be, I don't want my child to die. Number 3, motherhood involves selflessness. This is from verse number 26. Notice, the true mother was willing to surrender her claim in order to preserve her child's life. This teaches us great lessons today about the real sacrificial nature of love. Was when Jesus Christ was hanging on the cross. She was right there at the foot of the cross. She was able to watch the entire thing. You remember what she was told earlier in her life? That a sword would pierce her soul. You suppose that was part of it, the day that she looked upon Jesus as her son was being crucified? Possession is less important than protection. Another lesson we learn from this text, from verse number 26, and this is a real deal for a lot of people. In fact, Mother's Day is not always a happy day like it is for a lot of others. And we need to be cognizant of that. But grief is real. Grief and loss can deeply affect a mother. The other woman had lost her child and appears emotionally broken and, I might even say, hardened by the circumstance. The loss of a child can profoundly wound a parent. She's like, let him be neither mine nor yours, but go ahead and let him divide him. What is she thinking? I'm in pain, be in pain with me. Unresolved pain can distort judgment and behavior. Our human brokenness often lies beneath harmful actions. And so our heart goes out to this other mother. My heart goes out to these two women because of what they were reduced to doing. You know that they had no family to help take care of them. If they were reduced to prostitution as an only means of survival, then the state of the nation was really bad. It wasn't that great. They had not followed God's ways. Otherwise, there wouldn't be poor people at all. All of the laws of God on morality are being thrown out the window just to make ends meet. Who's going to plead their case? Who's going to, and then at the same time, you know, you got the whole immorality. I mean, where there's a woman, there's a man that's willing to be participating in this thing. This is not a great situation for the nation. And so it's really a tragedy all the way around. It's not just about the death of the other child. It's not just about these two women that are social rejects and kind of feel forced to live this life. If Jesus had been on scene, I wonder what he would have said. I wonder how Israel could have changed the life for these women. Mothers deserve justice and dignity too. Verse number 27. Even though the women were described as harlots, Solomon treated their case very seriously. He doesn't address their prostitution. He addresses the situation at hand. And you think about a child, an infant death. I think the first funeral I ever did for a family was the death of an infant that died in a very similar way as this. And it messed them up, the parents. It really messed them up. There's a lot of guilt that feels unget-overable. So people try to mask that pain with other sin and distractions. We used to worry about all our children. I can remember the first time that Caden slept through the night. Lena used to have to rib me and punch me because my job was when the babies would cry, they were ready for a feeding, I'd go to the crib and get the baby and change them and bring them to Lena, and she would feed them, and then I'd put them back. And that was kind of our order of things. But I can remember the first night that Caden slept through the night, I woke up in a panic. I mean, I was so freaked out because I'd been used to him crying. And so I get up out of bed, and Lena says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to go check on Caden." She goes, "Do not wake that baby up." And I said, "Well, I have to go check." I mean, I got a mirror out, and I was putting it in because he felt a little cold and everything, and I put the mirror up to his nose and wanted to see breath on it and all that, and finally I could go back to bed. But I was so worried about that. And parents do this. They worry about these kind of things, and for that very reason. We care about life. Life is precious. No matter if they are born of fornication or a heritage unto the Lord. Those children didn't do anything wrong. Every child deserves to be brought up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And then finally this morning, a mother's love, a true mother's love, can reveal the truth. Verse 27. The king covered but through her response in love. Love exposed the authenticity. The heart of the mother revealed in a moment of crisis. And sacrificial love is difficult to fake. Protective, compassionate, sacrificial. That's a true mother. That's a true mother. And when I read a text like this, that's designed primarily to show the wisdom of Solomon, within a context like today, where our focus is on mothers, I have a very hard time. It doesn't seem to be about Solomon at all. I mean, it is, textually speaking, grammatically it is. But when you focus on the mother, and you say, God has taken some people out of some very weird places and put them into some very high position. I mean, you think about Rahab the harlot, and look, she's in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. How did she get there? Because God is able to take people from really bad that we could never fathom of even doing ourselves. He sees in you a lot of times what you cannot even see in yourself. And that's why we must teach the gospel. Did you ever notice when we think about Proverbs 31, we always think about the Proverbs 31 woman as a wife. But you can think of the Proverbs 31 woman as a mother. Chapter 31. One, it's the words of King Lemuel, the utterance which his mother taught him. King Lemuel. Lemuel means for God. And a lot of people think it's just another nickname for Solomon, but we really don't know. We don't know. But the point is this. What did she teach him? Oh, here's a... Do not give your strength to women, nor your ways to that which destroys kings. It's not for kings, O Lemuel. It's not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink. Let drink and forget the law, and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. Don't get tied up. Get tied up with the wrong kind of woman. Don't be out there drinking that alcohol. Watch yourself. Stay sober. Stay vigilant. Your adversary, the devil, is walking about like a roaring, seeking whom he may devour. And so she is instructive. And then later on for her household. Household, for all of her household is clothed with scarlet, verse number 21. Verse 27, she watches over the ways of her household. Verse 28, her children, listen, her children do. Honor thy father and thy mother. The lesson is yours. Maybe you're here today. I want you to think about your relationship with Jesus Christ today. I want you to think about whether you die one in covenant with Jesus Christ today. Listen, I want you to know that there's a great day coming. A great day coming in which the world will be judged by Jesus Christ. A judgment day is coming. But I want you to know is in His mercy and His love is like His hand reaches out towards us, looking for us to reach up in faith. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. I've just not been living right. I haven't been living in covenant with Him. I want you to know you can grab a hold of the hand of Jesus today. You can make that right. Jesus can make it right for you if you're agreeable to it. If you're ready to walk in truth. In truth. Oh, how every mother who knows God prays for her children to be saved and to stay saved, but that those patients the women, and I'll say, what can I do for you today? How can I pray for you? And they're not worried about their health. They're not praying for healing. 9 times out of 10, brethren and friends, Those women that are in the hospital that I pray, are you worried about? Worried about your children? Yes. What are you worried about? I want them to know Jesus. I want them to be saved. They're just not living right. When we live in a way cause parents to worry about us, that's a pretty good indication we need to come to Jesus. We can help you with that. If you're not sure what to do or how to do that, we want to help you with that. We want to set up a Bible study with you. If you're here today and you simply need the prayers of the church, whatever your spiritual need is, I wish you'd let us know by meeting the elders in the back or coming down front and expressing that to us even now while we stand and sing.